And, you know, that'll make people pretty cynical about politics. Now, let's be fair, though. The other party's opposition is also rooted in some sincere beliefs about how they think the economy works. They think that our economy will do better if we just let the banks or the oil companies or the insurance industry make their own rules. They still believe that even after the Wall Street crash, even after the BP oil well blew, that we should just keep a hands-off attitude. They think we should keep doing what we did for most of the last decade leading up to the recession. So their prescription for every challenge is pretty much the same. And I don't think I'm exaggerating here. Basically cut taxes for the wealthy, cut rules for corporations, and cut working folks loose to fend for themselves. Basically, their attitude is you're on your own. Now, here's the problem. And again, I don't question that a lot of them sincerely subscribe to this view. Here's the problem. We've already tried these ideas. Remember, we tried them for 8 years. We tried them for a good part of the last decade. We know where they led us. On Wall Street, the financial industry and its lobbyists spent years chipping away at rules and safeguards that could have prevented the meltdown of that was caused by Lehman Brothers and AIG. But we didn't have those rules in place, that framework of regulation in place. So instead, we saw a disaster that nearly led to the collapse of the entire economy. In the Gulf, we don't yet know what caused the explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, but what we do know is that for decades, the oil industry has been able to essentially write its own rules and safety regulations. Industry insiders were put in charge of industry oversight, and oil and gas companies were allowed to basically fill out their own safety inspection forms. In Washington, nearly a decade of tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires led to little more than sluggish growth, a shrinking middle class, your paychecks flatlined. Wages and incomes did not go up. Even when the economy was growing, it wasn't growing for you. And for all the parties moralizing about fiscal discipline, because it is true that part of what we inherited is a real significant problem in terms of spending at the federal level, the economic policies they put in place turned a $237 billion surplus into a $1.3 trillion deficit. So when there were a couple of signs when I came in said, do something about spending. I'm game to do something about spending, but let's just remember how we got into this fix. Now, I've never believed the government has all the answers. That's not how America thinks. Government can't and should not replace businesses as the engines of growth and job creation in our economy. Government should live within its means. We should root out waste and abuse of taxpayer dollars wherever and whenever we can. Too much regulation can stifle competition and hurt businesses. But if you think about the history of this country, we've always recognized that there are times when only government has been able to do what individuals couldn't do and what corporations would not do. That's how we have railroads and highways and public schools and police forces. That's how we've made possible scientific research that led to the medical breakthroughs and technological wonders that all of us take for granted now. That's why we have Social Security and a minimum wage and laws to protect the food we eat and the water we drink and the air we breathe. That's why we have rules to ensure that mines are safe and that oil companies pay for the spills that they cause. And there have always been those who said no to these policies and these ideas. I mean, you look back on the history books, there were people who said that Social Security was socialism. said that Medicare was a government takeover. There were automakers who said that installing seat belts was unnecessary, unaffordable, and would ruin the auto industry. There were skeptics who thought that cleaning our water and our air would bankrupt our economy. Right here in Wisconsin. If you look at the lake now and look at the lake what it was like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and there were people who said, well, there's nothing we can do about all the sludge and drudge and whatever's going on in there. But they were wrong. They were wrong then, and they're wrong today. So I want everybody to understand, this debate that we're having in Washington is not about big government or small government. It's about responsible government. It's about accountable government. It's about whose side government is on. It should be on the side of the American people. A government that breaks down barriers to opportunity and prosperity. That's the kind of government we need. That's the kind of government I'm trying to give you. So I just want everybody to remember, we've tried the other side's theories. We know what their ideas are. We know where they led us. So now we've got a choice. We can return to what we know did not work, or we can build a stronger future. We can go backwards, or we can go forwards. And I don't know about you, but I want to move forward in this country. As we speak, right now, we're on the verge of passing the most comprehensive financial reform since the Great Depression. A reform that will prevent a crisis like this from happening again. It'll protect our economy from the recklessness and irresponsibility of a few on Wall Street. It'll protect consumers against unfair practices of credit card companies and mortgage lenders. It's a reform that makes sure taxpayers never have to engage in a bailout for Wall Street's mistakes. But I have to tell you, you would think this would be a bipartisan issue, don't you? I mean, you think everybody would say, all right, what we were doing, that didn't work. We really got to tighten things up a little bit. But right now, most of our friends in the other party are planning to vote against this reform. So the leader of the Republicans in the House said that financial reform was like, I'm quoting here, using a nuclear weapon to target an ant. That's what he said. He compared the financial crisis to an ant. This is the same financial crisis that led to the loss of nearly 8 million jobs. Same crisis that cost people their homes, their life savings. He can't be that out of touch with the struggles of American families. And if he is, then he's got to come here to Racine and ask people what they think. Do you think we should fix? I mean, maybe I'm confused. Do you think that the financial crisis was an ant and we just need a little ant swatter to fix this thing? Or do you think that we need to restructure how we regulate the financial system so you aren't on the hook again and we don't have this kind of crisis again? When you ask men and women who've been out of work for months at a time, who talk about how they've been, barely hanging on, they don't think this financial crisis was something where you just need a few tweaks. They know it's what led to the worst recession since the Great Depression, and they expect their leaders in Washington to do whatever it takes to make sure a crisis like this doesn't happen again. And so there may be those in Washington who want to maintain the status quo. But we want to move America forward. There are some folks who are against raising the limit on what companies like BP have to pay if they cause an environmental disaster. A few of them said they were against the $20 billion fund that we set up to make sure that workers and businesses in the Gulf whose livelihoods have been harmed by the oil spill, would get compensation. The top Republican on the Energy Committee apologized to BP. Did you all read about that? He apologized to BP that we had made them set up this fund. Called it a tragedy that we had made them pay for the destruction that they had caused. Now, I got to say, they pulled it back after. He meant it, but then they kind of walked it back.